The silence was the loudest thing, a crushing weight that pressed down on her, far heavier than the snow burying her. Her name, whispered in the wind that bit at her exposed skin, was already fading from memory, just as her body's warmth was. They had left her, her own people, for a transgression she couldn't control, the barrenness of her womb. The Athabaskan elders, their faces grim under the harsh Alaskan sun, had decreed it. A woman who could not bear children was a burden, a drain on precious resources, especially in the lean months. She was left on the edge of their winter camp, a sacrificial offering to the unforgiving wilderness. Hours, or perhaps days, had blurred into an agonizing monochrome of white and cold. Her fingers, stiff claws against the snow, had long ceased to feel. The biting wind carried the scent of pine and something else, the faint, metallic tang of desperation. Her breath, ragged gasps, plumed like ghosts in the frigid air. Consciousness flickered, a dying ember in a desolate hearth. She saw faces, distorted by the cold, heard the echoes of their pronouncements. Unworthy. Empty. Each word a new laceration. Then a shadow. Not the familiar outline of a spruce or the fleeting glimpse of a wolf, but something larger, more defined. A man. His silhouette, hunched against the snow, appeared first as a trick of her failing vision. He was an outsider, she knew, his furs rougher, his movements less fluid than her people's. He moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had long wrestled with the land and emerged, if not victorious, at least unbroken. As he knelt beside her, his breath, warm against her frozen cheek, was a shock, a sudden jolt of life in the numb expanse of her impending death. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more immersive stories like this one. Don't miss the next chapter of Athabaskan Woman, a name forged in snow. He was a trapper, a solitary figure named Silas, his face etched with the lines of countless winters and the deep sorrow of a life lived too long alone. His wife had been taken by the river's icy embrace years ago, leaving him with a silence almost as profound as the one that had settled over the Athabaskan woman. He had been checking his traps, a routine carved into the bone of his existence, when he stumbled upon her, a bundled form, almost indistinguishable from a drift of snow, but for the faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest. Silas, a man of few words and much practical knowledge, knew death when he saw it. But something in her stillness, a stubborn refusal to fully yield, caught his attention. He was no stranger to the harshness of the land, nor to the desperate measures people took to survive it. Gently, with surprising tenderness for a man whose hands were accustomed to skinning animals, he lifted her. Her weight was alarmingly light, a bundle of brittle bones and fading warmth. He carried her to his cabin, a sturdy log structure nestled deep in the pines, smoke curling lazily from its stone chimney. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke, curing hides, and a faint aroma of simmering stew. He laid her on a rough cot near the crackling fireplace, its warmth a living, breathing thing against the cabin's chill. Her skin, when he carefully removed her frozen outer layers, was like ice. He rubbed her hands and feet, slowly, patiently, feeling for any sign of life, any twitch of muscle. It was a long, silent vigil, punctuated only by the hiss of the fire and the labored sound of her breathing. He poured hot broth, thin but nourishing, down her throat, drop by precious drop. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story. All he knew was that she was a human being, teetering on the precipice, and he, for some inexplicable reason, couldn't let her fall. Days bled into a slow, arduous recovery. The woman, still nameless to Silas, drifted in and out of consciousness. Her fever raged, then receded, leaving her weak and disoriented. Silas, though gruff and reserved, tended to her with an unwavering dedication. He changed her bandages, fed her small portions of food, and kept the fire roaring, a constant beacon against the biting cold outside. His movements were efficient, his presence quiet but reassuring. When she finally opened her eyes fully, truly seeing him, a flicker of fear, raw and instinctual, crossed her face. Her people, for all their harshness, had been familiar. This man, with his grizzled beard and eyes that held a lifetime of solitude, was an unknown. She tried to speak, but her throat was raw, her voice a mere croak. Silas, understanding her unspoken question, simply shook his head. "No need for words yet," he rasped, his voice rough with disuse. "Just rest." She watched him from her cot, observing his routines. He moved with a practiced ease, checking his traps, preparing meals, mending his gear. He rarely spoke, but his actions conveyed a quiet competence that slowly, gradually, began to chip away at her fear. Yet the memory of her abandonment lingered, a cold knot in her stomach. She was adrift, severed from her past, her identity, her very purpose. The warmth of Silas's cabin was a stark contrast to the icy betrayal of her tribe. She knew she owed him her life, but what kind of life awaited her now? And who was she, truly, without a name, without a people, without a future? The question hung heavy in the air, unspoken, but as chilling as the Alaskan winter outside. As the days turned into weeks, the woman regained her strength, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Her muscles, atrophied from disuse, protested with every movement, but she pushed through the pain. She began to help Silas with small tasks around the cabin, mending clothes, preparing simple meals from dried meat and berries. They communicated with gestures, shared glances, and the occasional grunt from Silas. A strange, unspoken understanding began to develop between them, born of shared solitude and the harsh demands of their environment. One evening, as the northern lights painted the sky with ethereal greens and blues, Silas sat by the fire, sharpening a hunting knife. The woman watched him, her gaze contemplative. She still had no name, and the silence around that fact had become a palpable weight. Finally she broke it, her voice still a little hoarse but clear enough. "My people, they called me nothing." It was a stark admission of her profound loss, the erasure of her identity. Silas looked up, his eyes, usually so guarded, softening slightly. He considered her for a long moment, his gaze taking in her strength, her quiet resilience, the way she had clung to life with such fierce determination. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spoke. "You fought the snow. You found the fire." He paused, a faint smile touching his lips. "I will call you Anya. It means resurrection in some old tongue, for you have risen from the snow, haven't you?" Anya, the sound of it, a gentle melody, filled the cabin. It was a gift, a rebirth, a recognition of her struggle and her survival. It wasn't a name from her past, but a name for her future, given by the man who had pulled her from the jaws of death. A tear, the first she had shed since her abandonment, traced a path down her cheek, warm against the lingering chill of her past. She looked at Silas, a silent gratitude blossoming in her heart. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow Anya's incredible journey. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single chapter. With a name, Anya felt a subtle shift within herself, a reclamation of her own existence. She began to speak more, asking Silas about the land, the animals, his life as a trapper. He, in turn, slowly began to share snippets of his own story, the raw pain of his wife's loss still evident in his eyes, but softened by time and the presence of another human being. They spent hours together, sharing stories of survival, of loss, and of the relentless beauty and brutality of the Alaskan wilderness. Anya learned the rhythms of the traplines, the subtle signs of animal tracks, the precise way to set a snare. Silas, in turn, learned from Anya about the medicinal properties of various plants, the intricate patterns of the Athabaskan beadwork, and the quiet resilience that ran deep in her people's spirit. They worked in tandem, a silent efficiency growing between them as they navigated the daily challenges of their isolated existence. The cabin, once a symbol of Silas's solitude, slowly transformed into a shared space, filled with the quiet hum of two lives intertwined. Yet despite the growing understanding, unspoken shadows lingered. Anya carried the deep wound of her abandonment, a fear of being a burden, of not being enough. Silas, for his part, wrestled with the ghost of his past, the fear of attachment, of loving and losing again. These unspoken fears, like the persistent chill of the Alaskan winter, were always present, testing the fragile bond that was slowly, almost imperceptibly forming between them. The external struggles of survival were constant, but the internal battles, the ones fought within the confines of their own hearts, were often the most arduous. Spring arrived, bringing with it a torrent of melting snow, swollen rivers, and the resurgence of life in the Alaskan wilderness. The traplines, once Silas's sole focus, now became a joint endeavor. Anya, nimble and observant, proved to be an invaluable asset. She spotted tracks Silas might have missed, understood the subtle shifts in animal behavior, and navigated the thawing terrain with an innate sense of direction. Their catches increased, providing a buffer against the lean months and a sense of shared accomplishment. One crisp morning, as they checked a line further from the cabin than usual, they stumbled upon fresh bear tracks. A large grizzly, too close for comfort. Silas, his hand instinctively going to his rifle, assessed the situation with a grin set to his jaw. He had faced bears before, but the thought of Anya being in danger brought a new, unfamiliar surge of protectiveness. He explained the danger, the need for heightened awareness, the silent communication required in such encounters. Anya listened, her face serious, her eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. Later that day, a sudden, blinding snow squall descended, trapping them far from the cabin. The temperature plummeted, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf. Silas, his face etched with concern, immediately set about building a makeshift shelter. Anya, remembering the lessons from her childhood, instinctively gathered pine boughs for insulation. Her movements quick and efficient, they huddled together in the cramped shelter, sharing their dwindling provisions, the warmth of their bodies a small defiance against the encroaching cold. In that moment, stripped bare of all but their shared vulnerability, the last vestiges of their individual solitude began to crumble. The wild, in its brutal indifference, was forging a bond between them stronger than any they had known before. As summer bloomed, bringing a brief, vibrant explosion of wildflowers and long sunlit days, Anya found herself haunted by snippets of her past. Memories of her tribe, of the familiar rhythm of their lives, surfaced unbidden. She remembered the laughter of children playing by the river, the deep wisdom in the eyes of the elders recounting ancient stories by the fire, the comforting scent of wood smoke mingled with rendered fat, and the profound sense of belonging that had once defined her every waking moment. And then, without warning, the abrupt, chilling memory of her abandonment would resurface, a stark reminder of the fragile nature of acceptance and the sharp sting of betrayal. She often found herself staring out into the vast wilderness, a deep, almost aching longing in her eyes, a longing for a connection that had been severed, a sense of home that was now irrevocably lost. Silas, observant as he was, could not ignore the quiet melancholy that sometimes settled over her, a stark contrast to her burgeoning strength. One evening, as they sat by the river fishing in the twilight, the air still and cool, Silas finally broke the comfortable silence that had settled between them. His voice, usually gruff, was softer, more hesitant. "You think of your people," he stated, not as a question but as a simple, profound observation. Anya nodded, her gaze fixed on the shimmering water where the last light of day danced on the surface. "Sometimes," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, thick with unspoken emotion, "I wonder if they are well, if they remember me." She didn't voice the deeper, more painful question that gnawed at her, a bitter ember in her heart. "Do they ever think of what they did? Do they feel any remorse for casting me out?" Silas, understanding the unspoken pain, the chasm of longing and hurt, simply placed a large, calloused hand gently on her arm, a rare and profound gesture of comfort. He had never spoken much of his own past, of the details of his wife's passing, but Anya knew the depth of his loss, the silent grief that had shaped his solitary existence. They were two broken vessels, each carrying their own scars, finding an unexpected, profound solace in each other's quiet presence. However, the world beyond their cabin was vast and increasingly unpredictable. The growing number of white trappers and prospectors venturing further into the territory, driven by the insatiable pursuit of furs and gold, brought new challenges, new conflicts, rumors of increased competition for game, dwindling resources in traditional hunting grounds, and violent clashes with native tribes reached even their isolated corner of the wilderness, carried on the wind by passing travelers. The peace they had found, fragile as it was, felt increasingly threatened by these encroaching shadows on the horizon, hinting at a future that would demand more than just their individual resilience. The late summer brought an unusual chill that permeated the very bones of the land, a stark premonition of the harsh winter that was rapidly approaching. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the subtle, sharp tang of impending change. News from the nearest trading post, carried by a lone, weary prospector who stumbled into their camp, painted a grim and unsettling picture. More trappers, desperate and driven by the dwindling opportunities in the south, were pushing relentlessly northward, encroaching directly upon the traditional Athabaskan hunting grounds. Tensions were dangerously high, a palpable static in the air, and whispers of violence circulated like the bitter, cutting wind, carrying tales of skirmishes and broken treaties. Silas, usually an island of calm, unconcerned with the affairs of others beyond his immediate trapping lines, felt a knot of cold unease tighten in his stomach. He had built his entire life on the bedrock of solitude, a deliberate choice to avoid the complexities of human interaction. But now Anya was irrevocably a part of that life, and by extension, her people's precarious fate was intrinsically intertwined with hers. He could no longer simply turn away. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long, stark shadows across the landscape, a group of trappers stumbled upon Silas's cabin. Their faces, hardened by greed, desperation, and the brutal realities of the wilderness, were grim. They were not friendly men. Their arrival immediately brought a chill that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. Their eyes, cold, calculating and predatory, swept over Silas's successful traps, then lingered on the well-stocked cabin, clearly envying his prosperity. Finally, their gaze settled, with an unsettling possessiveness, on Anya. A native woman living with a white man was an unusual and provocative sight in these parts, and they quickly jumped to their own ugly conclusions, their imaginations fueled by prejudice and the raw edge of competition. Harsh words were exchanged, insults slung like stones, threats veiled at first, then becoming outright chillingly direct. They spoke of claims and property, their words laced with a dangerous sense of entitlement. Silas, his hand resting almost imperceptibly on the worn stock of his rifle, stood firm by the cabin door, his gaze unwavering, a silent, unyielding defiance in his posture. He wouldn't let them take what was his. wouldn't let them harm Anya, not while breath remained in his body. Anya, witnessing the confrontation from within the cabin, felt a familiar, paralyzing terror rise within her, cold and sharp. It was the same primal fear she had felt when her tribe abandoned her on the edge of the camp. The soul-crushing fear of being utterly powerless, of being reduced to an object to be discarded or claimed by others. But something profound and undeniable had fundamentally changed within her. She was no longer the broken, nameless woman left for dead in the unforgiving snow. She had a name now, Anya, a symbol of her resilience and rebirth. She had Silas, a steadfast presence who had offered her fire and life, and crucially, she had found a deep, inherent strength she never knew she possessed, a quiet fire ignited by survival and compassion. As the trappers, muttering curses and lingering threats, finally retreated into the fading light, Anya looked at Silas, her eyes no longer filled with just fear, but with a fierce, unwavering new resolve. The isolated existence they had meticulously built, a fragile sanctuary from the world, was no longer enough. The world was undeniably closing in, bringing its conflicts and dangers to their doorstep, and they would have to face it, not as individuals, but as an unbreakable unit together. The recent chilling confrontation with the aggressive trappers served as a stark and undeniable awakening. The fragile illusion of their isolated peace, painstakingly cultivated in the Alaskan wilderness, was shattered completely. Silas, a man who had consciously spent a lifetime shunning company, a recluse by nature and by choice, now understood with startling clarity that their continued survival depended on far more than just his individual resilience or Anya's intuitive connection to the land. It required foresight, planning, and a willingness to engage with the world outside their cabin walls. He began to plan, his mind racing with possibilities, considering options he had never before entertained, perhaps trading more frequently and strategically at the distant posts, forging tenuous alliances with other honest, solitary trappers, or even the drastic yet increasingly necessary option of relocating to a less contested, more remote area away from the burgeoning conflicts. Anya, too, felt a powerful, invigorating new sense of purpose bloom within her. Her past, once a haunting source of deep pain and profound shame, the abandonment, the feeling of being discarded, now transformed, subtly but undeniably, into a wellspring of invaluable strength. She possessed an intimate, lifelong knowledge of the land, its hidden secrets, its treacherous pathways, its subtle rhythms. She understood the intricate nuances of native traditions, the unspoken rules, the delicate dance of communication that could either bridge seemingly insurmountable divides or, conversely, escalate minor conflicts into full-blown hostilities. She realized with a profound clarity that her knowledge, once deemed useless or even a liability by her own people due to her infertility, was now an invaluable asset, not just for their immediate survival in the unforgiving wilderness, but for navigating the increasingly complex and dangerous world that was encroaching upon them. One evening, as they shared a simple, comforting meal by the flickering firelight, the only sound the crackle of burning wood, Silas looked at Anya, his gaze steady, clear, and imbued with an unusual softness. "This life," he said, his voice a low rumble, softer than usual, yet filled with a quiet conviction. "It's not just mine anymore, it's ours." Anya met his gaze, a quiet, profound understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the deep bond that had forged itself between them. The unspoken fears, the lingering shadows of their painful pasts, her abandonment, his crushing loss, were still there, dormant but present like the deep snows of winter. Yet they no longer defined them. They were two unique individuals, each profoundly scarred by loss and rejection, who had, against all odds, found an unlikely sanctuary, a mutual healing, and a profound sense of belonging in each other's presence. Their path forward was undeniably uncertain, filled with the inevitable, raw challenges of the Alaskan wilderness and the relentless advance of the outside world. But for the very first time in a long, long time, they faced it not as solitary, isolated figures, but as a cohesive, resilient unit, bound by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet, enduring power of a name given and a life profoundly reclaimed. The winter that followed was one of the harshest in living memory, a relentless assault of ice and snow. Blizzards raged for days on end, trapping them in the sturdy log cabin, isolating them from an already isolated world. Resources dwindled precariously, and the grim threat of starvation loomed like a constant chilling presence. Yet through it all, Anya and Silas faced the challenges with a newfound, unwavering unity. They rationed their dwindling food with meticulous care, adapted their hunting and trapping strategies to the brutal conditions, and found an unexpected, potent strength in each other's unwavering presence. Anya's deep intuitive knowledge of foraging for hidden roots and resilient berries, combined with Silas's seasoned trapping skills and his relentless determination, kept them from the brink. The cabin, once a simple shelter, a symbol of their individual isolation, became a powerful testament to their shared resilience, a warm, breathing haven against the relentless fury of the elements that raged outside. As spring finally returned, slowly coaxing vibrant green shoots from the thawing earth and melting the last stubborn snowdrifts, a profound sense of quiet hope bloomed within both Anya and Silas. The aggressive trappers who had threatened their peace had, thankfully, moved on, lured by rumors of richer grounds and easier fortunes elsewhere. The immediate danger had passed, but the hard-won lessons learned during the long, arduous winter remained, etched into their very beings. They knew with absolute certainty that their world was changing, rapidly and irrevocably, and they could no longer afford to live in the kind of complete isolation they had once embraced. Survival now demanded awareness, adaptation, and a strategic engagement with the world beyond their immediate valley. One clear morning, as the rising sun painted the distant mountain peaks in breathtaking hues of gold and rose, casting long, peaceful shadows, Anya stood by the cabin door, looking out at the vast, awakening expanse of the Alaskan wilderness. A deep sense of belonging, unlike anything she had ever known, settled within her. Silas joined her, his arm gently brushing hers, a comfortable, silent closeness between them. "What now, Anya?" he asked, his voice low and gentle, reflecting the serene beauty of the morning. She turned to him, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips, her eyes reflecting the endless sky. "We build," she said, her voice strong, clear, and imbued with a quiet power. "We learn. We adapt." The past, with all its searing pain and the profound abandonment, was an undeniable part of her story, a scar that reminded her of where she came from, but it no longer defined her. She was Anya, the woman who had miraculously risen from the snow, given a new name and a precious new beginning by a solitary widowed trapper. Together, they were ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon, not just surviving the relentless challenges of the wilderness, but truly living, forging a future built on the enduring warmth of their own internal fire, their unwavering resilience, and the quiet, profound power of their human connection. Thank you for joining us on Anya's incredible journey. This is just the beginning of many compelling, emotionally resonant stories we'll bring to you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us create more content that resonates, inspires, and explores the depths of the human spirit.